Okay, so let's see how this works. This is Qntkka. You're at 1.5. I hope you don't mind.
Okay, Piero, I'm going to give you a chance here. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Okay, how did Gamergate start? Why did Gamergate start?
How did it start? How did it start and why did it start? Well, I don't really see how this is relevant. I mean, especially until you come up with, you say that I should change my stories and that I have said that that Gamergate was just a bunch of sociopaths, did you say? And yet, just a couple weeks ago, I made clear my confusion as to what the fuck Gamergate was supposed to label. And I only knew it as the scandal name for this indie developer that slept with some game journalist and various things that snowballed from that. Right? But I don't really care. I have not said anything about them. And about MRAs, I have said there's good issues. Gaming and journalism, that's a legitimate issue too. It's down in the, in the list of thousands down towards the bottom of things that we must get to. But if that's what fills your boat, then, float it, go for it. So, you tried to make a big deal about me expressing my confusion, but I consider it just honesty, and I'm not making statements about the stuff that I announce and describe my confusion about. That stuff I'm trying to figure out. And you act like, well, you should know more about it. Well, I don't think I should know more about it. And that wasn't meant to be your voice at all. So my answer for the 1000th time is, as far as I know, it started with that affair and all of the shit storm that followed that. That it evolved or was something else or was even before that. That history is important, like all history, but it's relevant purely based on what Gamergate means now, if it does mean something that can be stated without just knowing the drama, right? What's come of it. If it's just a bunch of people that had an internet conversation, then that's somewhat interesting. And I could go through, 7 years of conversation with Gary too. It's probably only relevant to people that know about the current conversation, right? Anyway, here you go. Keep going.
What is Gamergate about? You tell me how you think it started, why it started, and what it's about.
Okay, so what I think it's about is I don't know what it's supposed to be about. Something I've asked you several times here about, it seems to have something to do with feminism and anti-feminism, and it seems to have to do with ethics and journalism, they say, and I don't see the link.
What's wrong with Thunderfoot criticizing Anita Sarkeesian, who claims to be a critic?
Well, there's nothing wrong with him criticizing her, but then there's nothing wrong with me criticizing his criticism of her as well.
What is wrong? What problem do you have with Thunderfoot criticizing Anita Sarkeesian?
See, none. What I have a problem with is his actual criticism. Not that he's having a criticism, that's fine. But my response is to his criticism. For example, how shallow it is, as if there is no such thing as tropes. And it follows from a greater conversation, for example, where he's really sure that women dressing conservatively is just exactly the same thing as locking your door. Right? Okay, I disagree with those things. Now, you said recently something to the effect that you do agree with them. Well, good for you. Is our disagreement confusing you about that we disagree? We disagree. It does not mean that I don't think you should be able to say your opinion. It doesn't even mean I don't think you should be allowed to have it. You should both be allowed to say it, and you should be allowed to have it. But I am allowed to criticize it. Right? Now, Thunderfoot, I have criticized on several videos, and it's in there that my criticisms lie. I think they speak for themselves.
Who herself claims to be a critic. Do you think Thunderfoot has a right to criticize Anita Sarkeesian?
For the many time Yes.
Or do you think he does not have a right to criticize Anita
He does have that right.
Sarkeesian? Do you believe in his freedom of speech
Yes.
as much as you believe in Anita Sarkeesian's freedom of speech?
Almost identically, if not exactly identically, because as I have said, I'm kind of surprised that people are arguing about things like the fairy princess tropes that are throughout these games and stuff. Seems pretty obvious. Like, if she hadn't gotten the what do you want to call it, the reaction that's in flack that she has gotten for it, I would have thought it was an inert statement that nobody would really pay attention to it being fairly straightforward. You make a mistake on tropes here later, acting like all tropes are necessarily bad. No, of course, art narratives use social narratives, which are tropes, you know.
These memes and tropes in video games. Okay, you don't like the idea of romanticism, or maybe that's going too far.
No, I don't like the idea of romanticism. And of course, we have to clarify for everybody, we're not talking about romance in the general meaning of, you know, bring your wife flowers. We're talking about this romantic novel concept, this literary concept of romance, which has heroes and villains and lots of war and bang, bang, pow, pow, even if it's not always literally like that. Or swords. It's the spirit is of these heroes and villains. For example, Ayn Rand, her stories follow the romantic models.
You say that the memes in the games, the damsel in distress tropes that people have in these games, the war metaphors, the aggression in video games, or the representations of violence and aggressive behavior in video games, you seem to think that it's a bad thing, yet.
Yeah, well, let's just stop right here, because I think we're already at something where you act like you've listened really carefully, but you've just heard what you want to hear. Like, ooh, Piero said something about Gamergate that shows he doesn't know this detail. Fine, but if you're listening that closely, a video game I play a lot, really, you know, an hour or more a day probably, because I play it during breaks. It's a first-person shooter, like Quake. It's a Quake kind of game. And so you probably don't even understand my attitude towards playing them. I've said I played them and would, and I don't feel any guilt or angst about it. But let's just continue the question.
You seem to think that we should not ban that bad thing or those bad things, and we should not remove those bad things. If I'm wrong on that, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, just.
No, you are correct. I do not think we should remove or ban them. Shit. Okay, let's see, where were we?
Tropes that people have. The aggression, influence, and aggressive behavior in video games. You seem to think that it's a bad thing, yet you seem to think that we should not ban that bad thing or those bad things, and we should not remove those bad things. If I'm wrong on that, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, just for clarity, I want to get this straight here, because you kind of flip-flop on these issues.
No, I've never flip-flopped on this issue at all, whatsoever. I mean, back in 2000, I was looking for a job after being in the game industry, and it was all these kinds of murder simulations. And so I decided not to keep pursuing those jobs, and I went and did something else. I decided it wasn't worth working in this industry anymore, Coming out of there of Pac-Mans and Tetrises and into that wasn't really interesting to me. Did I think those people shouldn't be allowed to make those games? No, you know, it's, is there, you know, I think wish the audience would demand different, but whatever. And I have been always consistent on this. This is something I've told you before. See, I believe that by doing criticism and having the public dialogue, that things can change naturally. People might get the idea, yeah, I will make a different kind of game from this conversation. You don't have to make things illegal. The conversation itself has natural results.
You say that you don't want to ban aggressive and violent video games with war memes and war tropes. You don't want to do that. You don't want to ban video games with the damsel in distress, the romance tropes, right?
Right. What I said is if you went into the country's bookstores and they all had just like spy and war thrillers, I wouldn't want to ban those to point out that, hey, you guys, culture, you can do more than this.
Okay, but you suggest that we replace it with something else.
No, not replace necessarily. I think replace is a part of what, happens over time. You could call it replacement. It might look like replacement. I think we need to add, as we keep making new titles, we're not going to erase any of the old titles and put something else in their place. As we make new titles, I hope to see a wider breadth that uses this art form, this medium, in an art form that continues to evolve. And it will include war games, just like there's war movies, but there's also the Seven Samurai.
That is something that anyone can say. And if we just leave it at that, you've accomplished nothing with your statement. Your statement's a non-statement. It is a non-activist statement.
No, that's this. I believe the conversation that comes from making critiques of video games, critiquing the critiquer and critiquing the critiquer of the critiquer, and you now critiquing the critiquer of the critiquer of the critiquer of the critic, or whatever, lost track. I think that has a positive result. I believe it's quite analogous to shining light on something.
You're saying, I think this is bad, but we should do nothing about it. That's what you're saying. You want to say something.
I think what's bad is the paucity of metaphors that are being reused. Like, we need more metaphors. It's like if we had just one myth and we're just telling one of the Greek myths over and over and over, we're really missing a lot of the metaphors that help people have, a variety of tools and ways of thinking
about it, and give us a suggestion, any little inkling as to what you would replace these tropes and memes with.
Well, a current example, for example, I mean, it's happening naturally. This is one reason I don't think that, it's not like I'm trying to be Mao and from on high say what video games should have in them. I think Minecraft is a good example. I think a lot of the web games that are coming along are perfectly good examples. And I think some of the war games were really good. Battlefield, I think that's the one, seemed really cool. I would like to play those games. I'd like them to be among the genre, and we just fill in all the empty space where, we're not telling as good a stories as humans actually know how to tell, and we're not necessarily using cinematography because everything's an action flick, that kind of thing. And I think it will fill in naturally. And one way for that to happen is for us to pay attention to the genre and have an open conversation about it.
You have to come up with something on your own. It can't be like Tetris, right? Which has already.
Well, that's funny because I actually, do have game ideas, and I'm going to get back into gaming. I always said I would never go back into gaming if I had to work for someone else. But now, with my own business, I can do, a little bit of stuff. And actually, I set up a Minecraft server last weekend, and I'm about to have some time between contracts, and I'll probably work on it more, but I'm not going to tell you what those ideas are. You might steal them. Of course, I could say Tetris and whatnot. These are examples of Myst and various games, but I'm not saying they're better games than Grand Theft Auto, because Grand Theft Auto is a great work of programming. Frankly, there is a story. Frankly, the freedom to run around the city is a part of an artistic statement just because of the state of games. Maybe once that's always the case, it would be different. But it was a statement of theirs to make sure that could be done, and a technical accomplishment. And it's like, I'm a big fan of the Al Pacino Godfather. Was that what it was called? And I'm not saying that a happy, peaceful movie is better. For example, I would say like Pan's Labyrinth. I think that's a really, really awesome movie. Well, I'm not going to say some pretty happy Hidden Garden, is automatically better. I happen to like dark movies, but if I saw one thing dominating, that would be an issue. And if I see like traditional tropes that come from the idea of heroes and villains, and heroes and dragons, and basically these war ideas that when you try to think of a real life situation using these tropes, they lead to the problem that I, as a peace activist, think that the world is dealing with. I don't believe laws would solve anything. I believe the laws, a good law, comes from people's, the culture's attitudes, and therefore discussing things with people in the culture is the way to find some agreement. And probably in the end, it won't be exactly anything I could picture. It'll be some third, better alternative that our children and grandchildren have figured out.
Been created. We know that Tetris exists. It's already out there in the gaming world, right? We know that Candy Crush exists, right? We know that there's all these games that really have very little, if anything, to do with sex or violence. Come up.
If you want to talk about a game activism that really bugs me, it's this Farmville kind of thing, or where you buy real world money to buy things, or Clash of Clans, where they get the kids in there with this game that's theoretically free, but if you buy $10 worth of points, you can, save yourself a lot of time and do this, quicker. And then, so without people committing to a flat rate, monthly rate even, they get these kids to beg their parents constantly for $10 of these and $10 of these. And now there's something in gaming ethics that I think you guys could tackle.
Something besides that will trump the sex and violence.
Why would it have to trump? You just don't get it. I like sex and violence and B movies and all the rest just fine. Okay, even they can be intellectually stimulating, and even they can be not intellectually stimulating and just be entertaining. That's all fine. Not trumping anything. I'm just saying, when you have this predominance of war and monster gaming, full of these romantic tropes from the age of heroes, I think that's a problem, especially when every other medium that we have as humans has comics. Even, it's such a much wider variety of things that have, gotten notice and appreciation. Now, in gaming, that's obviously happening with all of these indie games, and there's no doubt games out there that are all these fantastic things or whatever, and that's fine, because all I'm saying is I've watched, a couple decades of Call of Duty, Halo, and this is as someone who likes first-person shooters. If they're online, I don't like playing them against robots. I like playing them against humans. Bored with the go around the corner, shoot a monster, go around the corner, shoot a monster, get a bigger gun, shoot a bigger monster. I like laser tag with humans, So that's what I like first-person shooters for. And I just think that if somebody's pointing out the tropes in some of these games that really are there, that this overreaction is well, that's really of note, and that's what I've been noticing.
Be sellable, that will turn a profit for the gaming industries, and hopefully be something.
Well, I think we're going to have a lot of games like Minecraft, where you have balanced worlds, and there's a million things you can do in that game, even things that the person making the game didn't think of. Let's say by allowing modding, there's all kinds of online games in Minecraft, like Hunger Games and parkour games and stuff like that. And I think we're going to have a lot of these buildable worlds that also you can do things in. You don't just always build. You don't have to build at all. You could just go adventure and hunt or whatever.
Educational, acknowledging or furthering human rights, right? Okay, so what is your new meme or your new trope? Because whatever you use to replace this with, it's going to become a meme or a trope. So whatever you...
Well, you would hope. I mean, an artist's dream would be to create a new meme, right? So, but as I said, I mean, these are just cultural ideas. By definition, if art, can they either become a meme or it's borrowing from meme, and a lot of theorists, would say it has to always borrow from memes or people won't understand it at all. It has to be with reference to the culture in some sense, or some piece of culture or history that people can relate to or think they're relating to. So, of course, they're going to be made of tropes and memes. That's what the art, that's the idea craft of artists.
You do to replace it, it's going to become, if it's successful, it's going to become the next trope, and then somebody's going to bitch about that.
And do you have a problem with that? Because I'm saying everybody, bitch about what you want to bitch about, and then bitch about the people, what they bitched about, and that they bitched about, and then bitch about it, and just don't prohibit any of it. So I don't understand. It's like, oh, why even bother? People will just complain again. It's like, yeah, people are always complaining. Get used to it, and welcome to the intertubes. All right. I hope you found these to be answers